Spongebob Squarepants, one of the most iconic names in all of pop culture. Up there with the other cartoon greats like Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, Tom and Jerry, and so on and so forth. Maybe to those who were growing up after the 2000s may not understand that SpongeBob was seemingly an omnipresent cartoon. Maybe if you're a bit older than I was, maybe you saw it as a teen, or maybe your kids grew up during the rise of SpongeBob. This little guy went from a bit of an oddball, even by Nickelodeon standards, to a household name in what seemed like the blink of an eye. He was everywhere. Literally hundreds of toys, fast food partnerships. He was even printed on candies and metric tons of video games. There were Lego sets, board games, even ads for entire store. Companies were just printing money by slapping SpongeBob onto their products. I never really grew up during the time of Turtlemania or the rise of Star Wars in the 70s or even early Pokemania in the late 90s. But SpongeBob was a comparable phenomenon, to say the least. Though it helped that SpongeBob really did have mass appeal. It literally was a show that appealed to everyone. It had the crazy visual gags that a cartoon would have, but also had a down-to-earth style of dialogue-based humor that adults would adore. Plus, the writers and animators made sure to slide in just enough jokes for the adults. Seriously though, the only other series that kinda had this level of omnipresence in the 2000s was Shrek. Though, Shrek only had 3 movies and a Christmas special during that time. And to be fair, I always thought SpongeBob had the better products anyway. Maybe there's something wrong with my brain, but green ketchup just kinda looks gross. Back to SpongeBob though. When it comes to SpongeBob, it's always made me curious about what Steven Hillenburg thought of its massive popularity. His story alone is so intriguing. As some of you probably already know, he started out studying to be a marine biologist, but he also had a love for art and animation. He actually made comics to educate people on sea life, and painted and even made sculptures out of leftover parts of things like toys. He always seemed to have a sort of creative spirit to himself. So imagine that a cartoon you made, just wanting to have fun and mix your two loves together, becomes a massive mega hit. Your cartoon becomes globally beloved in what seems like overnight. That's gotta be a lot of pressure. Now, the cynics of the world would probably try to capitalize on this as soon as it happened, and trust me, they did, or at least tried. Hillenburg would never really let any of these suits or these marketing agents truly try to over-corporatize or over-merchandise SpongeBob. In fact, there's definitely reviews out there where he talks about how it's a little frustrating that they tried to do this. And this is because at the end of the day, SpongeBob was a collaborative creation between artists, not businessmen and accountants. And this is where we get to the main topic of the video. The Spongebob Squarepants movie. Sure, maybe you could read it as a cynical cash grab for major box office bucks, but for Hillenburg, it was all about the fact that he wanted to challenge himself. As history has it, he originally wanted the film to be the final hurrah for not only SpongeBob, but also the last thing as a creative lead and showrunner on SpongeBob itself. Obviously, both of these things didn't last. SpongeBob is still ongoing to this day, to the chagrin of many who grew up during its peak. But also that Hillenburg would come back eventually to work on SpongeBob before he passed. I don't really know his reasoning as to why he came back, but it's nice that he eventually did nonetheless. I'll be real, as someone who aspires to make a great piece of art like SpongeBob, it would kind of screw with me to know that my work didn't end after I wanted it to, and that I had to hand it over to my team after the fact. But then again, Hillenburg had a really close relationship with his crew, so I think it might have not been the hardest decision for him to make. That, and maybe I'm just a bit selfish, I don't know. And to give a little backstory on myself and my connection with this movie, this film came out when I was very young, like around toddler aged, I believe. There's a sensation I like to called phantom memories, where it's something you can remember but in sort of broad or faded strokes. Sort of like watching an old VHS that's been a little sun-dried and worn out over the years. Like, sure, you can make out what it is, but there's layers over it, obscuring the whole thing. Also, while researching, turns out phantom memories is actually a real psychological term, and it's not exactly the most nice of terms to be relating to, so maybe I should probably rename this at some point. Anyways, I vaguely remember all the fanfare around the movie, including these huge balloons they put on top of the Burger Kings everywhere to market the film. Little side fact real quick, little side tangent if you will. During the time when Burger King was doing the promotion with the SpongeBob movie, people would actually show up overnight when the stores were closed and steal the balloons off the top of the Burger Kings and then sell them later for higher prices. It was actually happening all over America to the point where it was called sponge napping. Why can't people have normal hobbies like making useless YouTube video essays about crap you watched as a kid? The crazy part is one Burger King in Minnesota had their SpongeBob held for ransom. The ransom note read, "We have SpongeBob. Give us 10 Krabby Patties, fries, and milkshakes." The people holding the balloon ransom signed the postcard as Plankton and also wrote, "Patrick is next." Look, in hindsight, it's hilarious, but only funny to an outsider looking in. Anyways, as a kid, SpongeBob was always a part of my life. I think it'd be hard for any kid from Gen Z to imagine a world without SpongeBob in it. And this movie was always a major part of it for me, and I'd assume for a lot of other people. But enough rose-tinted retrospective. Let's actually take a deep dive into the Spongebob Squarepants movie. So, before talking about the creation of the SpongeBob movie itself, I'm going to go over the creation of SpongeBob and Stephen Hillenburg's early career. As I already said, he was originally studying to be a marine biologist, where I also mentioned he made comics educating the reader in marine biology. Well, in this comic, there's a sort of proto-SpongeBob. Well, he's called Bob the Sponge, but seriously, it's pretty much similar. He's also designed as the usual type of sea sponge, not really square as we know him yet. Eventually, Hillenburg got recruited into the CalArts School of Animation and made a crazy cool short film called Wormholes, which is a short film where he goes over the theory of relativity in a visual way. Actually, check it out if you could find it, it's really cool and experimental. However, someone who saw a showing of this film was Joe Murray, the creator of Rocko's Modern Life. And let's just say, this show, and probably Dexter's Lab, was pretty much a breeding ground for future animation talent. Like seriously, a lot of people who worked on these shows would later create many hit shows on their own. Stephen Hillenburg is a prime example of this. Eventually, Nick wanted new shows to air, and Hillenburg didn't really have any ideas. That was until someone read his old comic and went, "Hey, why not something like this?" And that spurred on his creation of SpongeBob. It really was something that was made at the right place with the right people at the right time. Interesting thing about SpongeBob's creation and story is that it was storyboard driven, meaning that the animators mainly focused on how to visually tell the story first and then wrote the scripts later. This style is pretty uncommon in Western animation. Usually the process in animated shows is script, storyboard, vocal capture, and then animation. However, they seem to swap these first two steps. This isn't the only show to do this, but it shows in SpongeBob's unique style and sense of humor. In the creation of SpongeBob, the character, Hillenburg pulled a lot of influence from Jerry Lewis for SpongeBob's personality and style. They wanted to lean into someone who was innocent, childlike, but had good intentions, but sometimes his need to help others would create chaos for everyone else around him. Of course, they got the stellar Tom Kenny to portray him, which, by the way, is one of the best voice actors to ever live. Another thing is, at least from what I've seen, the voice cast would actually record as a group. Now, this isn't commonly done in Western animation, but when it is, it creates a lot of good chemistry between the characters, creating banter, and also just making for better voice performances. To point out other shows and films that do this stuff, well, we've got Mutant Mayhem, Batman the Animated Series, and really all the DCAU stuff, Futurama, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Star Wars The Clone Wars, and Bob's Burgers, just to name a few. Now, what do all these shows have in common? That the performances are killer and that they're also really damn good shows. Now imagine working on the show in real time and also being responsible for a major motion picture. I bet Hillenburg was really feeling the pressure at some point, but I wouldn't really know. It's not like I was in the Nickelodeon offices as they made the show. For all I know, it was the happiest experience of his life. I tried to dig up articles, archives, and even videos on what Hillenburg felt about the movie, but I really couldn't find anything. I got little tidbits here and there about how they made the movie, but not much on what Hillenburg actually felt. I got something that he was originally resistant to the idea of making a movie, but nothing really substantiated that, no matter where I looked. Thus, instead I gave you a great look at how they actually made the series, made the show, and also what they felt about making the show and the ethos and message behind it, which is incredibly important to understanding the movie. Let's talk about that movie now, shall we? Wow, I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting an immediate nostalgia flashbang to the face. The Nickelodeon movie vanity card had me flashback into the past like that scene from Ratatouille. Oh, and for the record, the vanity card is a term for when a logo appears before the movie. I learned that when researching this video. Neat, huh? Of course, we start with a phenomenal intro, but one that is completely different from the last film I reviewed. No, instead, this is a classic live-action SpongeBob gag, and let's be honest, how else are we going to start a SpongeBob movie? All the specials have Patchy the Pirate introduced in the episode to the audience, which... Actually, wait a minute, where is Patchy? I can't complain too much. The scene is actually still great, but maybe having Patchy there would have been just a little extra layer of love to an already fun intro. This is probably the perfect way to get a dumbass kid, which was me by the way in the theater, I was like 2 or 3 when this came out, to get hyped for the movie, but to also focus on the movie. Also, whoever the guy is that's hitting that final note, he needs to get a raise or get hired to an opera. He's got some pipes on him. And now, we get to the meat and potatoes of the film, which is the animation. Just look at it. Hell, this movie today almost feels like an artifact. Major 2D animated films are basically dying, or already dead, depending on how you look at it, by the early 2000s. Like, it was the major animation style of the 80s and 90s, but as a 2000s baby, I could count the number of major impactful films animated and created in the 2000s on one hand. Maybe 2 hands if I really stretch it to count TV movies as well. Mind you, I'm not really complaining here. There were many great 3D animated films in that era. It's just that I'm for all the balance in my mediums. Oversaturation is always a bad thing in my eyes. But getting back on track, this is some of the best 2D animation ever put on film. I'll stake my credibility on that. The scene of SpongeBob getting ready alone is full of so many great pieces of animation and visual gags. Speaking of which, the mixed media segments are also incredible. The Shell City segment and even the Goofy Goober music video part are just phenomenal. And trust me, we'll get back to that Goofy Goober segment. It's practically the final form of SpongeBob when you think about it. The dialogue is also great in this movie. There's all sorts of punchy exchanges and puns all over this movie. There's so many scenes and little moments I could cram into this video, but that'd give me copyright strike to high hell, so I'll keep it to only a few. The one scene I want to focus on is this little scene.
You've got nothing to worry about. Your life is in our hands.
I mean, come on, that's just perfect. Dialogue, snappy, punchy, and just gets a good joke across. Now, here's another scene I'd love to focus on.
This is what a real mustache looks like.
Is he a mermaid?
Like, come on, every gag is so well crafted. It's either played up with a ton of setup for a quick payoff, but also just quick little moments that hit you where you least expect it. Honestly, if you want to learn how to write a good punchy comedy, maybe you should study this film. It's a great showcase of dialogue and visual humor. And the visual humor here is definitely peak as well. It helps that the animation is phenomenal, but there's some seriously great visual gag work on display here. I mean, what example do I even go to first? Oh, well, actually, I know.
All hail Plankton! All hail Plankton!
I'm ready. Promotion. I'm ready. Promotion. Ooh, I think I stepped in something.
Not in something, on someone, you twit!
Come on, I don't even need to explain why that's funny. It just is. Also, this has a great payoff later when Dennis tells SpongeBob and Patrick that Plankton specifically told him to step on them. There's also a ton of gags I never understood until I got way older. I mean, there's the gag of Plankton, looking at a Plan Z centerfold? Bro, Plankton a bit of a freak now looking back at his character. I also never got the David Hasselhoff joke when I was younger. I found it funny as hell, but the humor for me was more so random / who the hell is this guy type humor. Which it definitely still has that appeal, but now I understand there's actually a reasoning to why he's here. He was on Baywatch, played a famous lifeguard. Maybe some of you know that, maybe you don't. I've only seen like a couple episodes of the show and I think it's fine. It's very of the time. Also, fun fact. They made a 13-foot tall, 700-pound replica of David Hasselhoff to shoot some of the scenes in this movie. It's actually crazy to think about. Of course, the characterization in this movie is also top tier. SpongeBob, or at least classic SpongeBob, has always had a few great rules for characterization, which is that characters are not one note, characters' actions inform the story and the comedy, and this one is very important, good characters are not above getting frustrated or aggressive. Like, seriously, I feel like people nowadays are too afraid of making their characters get angry and fear that they won't be presented as likable. Well, this movie shows how to handle that well. Firstly, SpongeBob does make a bit of an ass of himself in the earlier part of the film, yeah. But we completely get why he'd be like that. If anyone got Employee of the Month 300 times in a row, I'd assume I was gonna get that promotion too. Now, does that make SpongeBob in the right for how he responded to his letdown? No, not really, but it's all about understanding. We understand why SpongeBob would get wasted on ice cream and lash out.
Alright, folks, this one goes out to my two bestest friends in the whole world, Patrick and his big peanut guy. It's a little ditty called
Oh hey, it's like Chuck E. Cheese in real life. The film's characterization works because every character does have flaws, but not everyone is an unlikable ass to everyone they interact with. Seriously, I really think a lot of new writers should learn the difference between a character flaw and your character just being a dick. Mind you, there's nothing wrong if your character was written to be a jerk or an ass if that's what you're going for, but you should learn the difference between flaws and just being a jerk if you want to learn how to write compelling characters. On another note, there wouldn't really be any characters if there wasn't a world for them to exist in. And this movie builds out the world beyond Bikini Bottom in a great and believable way. Part of this is because the animator and artist really leaned in, making every area visually distinct. The Thug Tug looks different from the Trench, and that looks different from Shell City. And it helps that they dot the world with these fun characters and creatures for our main duo to react to. My favorite example is this ice cream monster. Who on the creative team came up with this? It's completely absurd, yet fits into the world of SpongeBob perfectly.
There's always a bigger fish.
The performances in this movie are also top-notch. I think this is because they didn't fall for the big voice acting trap of the 2000s. That being hiring big-name actors without knowing if they'd even have great voice acting skills at all. Because it really is a different ballgame. You're relying completely on your voice, which means you've really got to hone in on enhancing your performance in different ways. Even when I record these videos, my amateur skills in voice acting help me sound a bit more soothing to your ears instead of the usual grating, chicken-like voice that I'm known for. Anyways, none of them done inflating my own ego. I've got to give the crew props for finding the perfect voices for all these characters. And I'm so glad they didn't focus on star power or who was big at the time. I genuinely think if they did that, it would age the film poorly. Like Chicken Little. Instead, they went for actors who fit the characters or had a range to do it with. We have Scarlett Johansson as Mindy, Alec Baldwin as Dennis, and Jeffrey Tambor as King Neptune. So yeah, enough celebrities that are known or will catch your eye, but practically everyone else are VAs from the series. And the new actors they do bring in just kill it. I will be real, I never knew Dennis was Alec Baldwin until like years later. And that's because he just melts into his role. Same thing with Jeffrey Tambor. These characters are more or less outside their usual range, but they understood that these are good actors who can do a bit of voice acting on the side, and it works for the film, it really does. The next thing to discuss, of course, is the music. Well, I think we already know that the normal music of SpongeBob is incredible. I'm talking about the songs that they made for the movie. They're just incredibly catchy. I could still keep rhythm with them to this day. Now That We're Men is just an incredibly jaunty, fun sing-along tune. But we all know what you really want me to talk about.
Hey, settle down. Take it easy. What the scallop?
ALL GOOFY GOOBERS!
This song is just a generational anthem. I mean it. I think every kid in the 2000s could tell you how they feel about this song. It just hits different. Which, this song also works because it's an encapsulation of the film's ethos. This movie, I think, is important to a lot of kids that grew up with it because it looked us all in the eye and gave us a beautiful lesson, without ever needing to talk down to us. It just told us, just because you grow up doesn't mean you have to lose any of your childlike wonder. And I still feel that to this day. I may not be the oldest guy, but I'm also not getting any younger. And let's just face the facts. We're in a chaotic time right now. Sorry to be a downer, but keeping that inner child in you alive is important in a lot of ways. It's part of your soul, your identity, your being. It allows you to see the warmth and love in the world. So, sure, maybe SpongeBob is a kid, but he has a stronger handle on his life than most of the other characters in this world. He moves through life his own way. Sure, he struggles and his childishness can get in the way and make problems for him, but at least he's himself, and he never went to the part of his mind and shut off his wonder for the world. I think a quote that understands this perfectly is a quote from one of my favorite authors, Terry Pratchett. He once said, "Imagination, not intelligence, made us human." And maybe that's a bit pretentious to bring up a quote on a review of SpongeBob, but I don't care. There's always that little spark within us, and SpongeBob taught me, and probably a lot of other kids too, to never let that spark go out. And that's all I really gotta say. Another review of a movie that's pretty near and dear to me. Though this movie is probably near and dear to a ton of you as well. I hope you enjoyed this video because I do want to make more content like this in the future. I'm a bit of a film nerd, and I've been since I was young, so I'm attached to a lot of different films, shows, movies, and all sorts of stuff. With all this being said, if you did enjoy it, please check out my other stuff. I've made a short film, some cool songs, some meant as a joke and others meant to be more serious, and other cool reviews, retrospectives, and even a ranking of all the Ben 10 aliens. With all that being said, I'll see you next time.